Okay, in about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good evening, good evening. This is Roger Williams with you. This is what we call Think About It. Welcome to our time together tonight. It's 8:30 on a Thursday evening. I want to welcome all of you back. We were not with you last week, but we are back this week, and we are here to share and talk about things. And hopefully in us talking about it, you will think about it. I'm so happy to have people via Zoom. And of course, we're streaming live on Facebook on First Baptist Church of Glen Cove and First Baptist Glen Cove Facebook pages. We are in a very serious, challenging time in our nation's history. In all of our nation's history, at least our generation of people have not seen such a time as this. What we need is wisdom. What we need is understanding. And I believe that I have somebody here with me tonight who's going to really provide for us wisdom. We need wisdom from people who have been there, done that, have seen things and seen them maybe more than once, maybe more than twice. And but like all of us, he is pastoring through a pandemic for the first time. But at the same time, he has a lot of wisdom to share with us. I just want to introduce him here to you, present him really to many of us here at First Baptist Church. This gentleman right now is in his 44th year of ordained ministry, preaching ministry. 44 years he's been ordained in the preaching ministry. And he has a lot of accomplishments behind his name. So many of them, I'm not able to mention them all tonight. I do believe there are a few things that we should mention. He's a trained man, Bachelor's of Science of Education out of Elizabeth City State University in North Carolina, Master's of Divinity from Virginia University. And he's also has an MBA program under his belt from Hofstra University in 1974. He has many other pastorates under his experience, but right now, everyone knows him to be the bishop, the pastor, the great leader of the Antioch Baptist Church, the Cathedral Church in Hempstead. And under his leadership, that church has grown and has done great work in the community. Just a few things that I want to mention here today as it relates to his work, not only at Antioch Baptist Church, but also the work that he has been doing here on Long Island, here in New York, and here for the county. He has served as Deputy County Executive for the Health and Human Services. Prior to that appointment as Deputy County Executive, he's also served as Executive Director of Minority Affairs, and prior as CEO for the Antioch Housing Fund Corporation and the Antioch Community Development Corporation. I just thought we needed to mention that, Bishop Elliott, about the holistic work that you have been doing, not only in Brooklyn, but here on Long Island. And I introduce to you all, present to you all formally tonight, a man that I love, a man that embraced me 21 years ago. And
21 years.
Yeah, 21 years. And made me feel right at home. He has provided platforms for me, opportunities for me. He's been there for me. And I just want to introduce him tonight. Bishop Phillip E. Elliott, God bless you. Thank you for being with us here tonight. I'm so happy for you to be here and be a part of this rich conversation that we so much need to have. How are you tonight, Bishop? How are you doing? How's your week?
Doing well. A long day, steady day, but a good day. And thank God for this opportunity to share with one of my favorite preacher pastors in the universe, Pastor Roger Williams. And what a blessing you are to me and to the body of Christ, and especially to this territory that God has assigned us to be partners in ministry.
Thank you so much. Of course, I need to share this too. You have been faithful in allowing me to be a part of one of the most, the richest experiences that I can think about in my preaching opportunities. The 7 Last Sayings every Good Friday at noon at the Antioch Church. I want to thank you publicly for always allowing me and my congregation to be a part of that rich experience, the brotherhood, connectivity that we have. It goes beyond words for me to express it. I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Raj, Pastor. You add to that richness. You are an integral part of that richness.
Thank you, thank you. Could you please let Sister Elliott know that we love her here at First Baptist? Thank you.
I shall.
Yes, thank you to Lady Elliott. She has been with you now for 47 years of marriage, and she's with you in the ministry. We certainly want to recognize her here tonight and recognize all of our friends too at the Antioch Church and all of our brothers and sisters out in Hempstead. Let me just start with a conversation here tonight, Bishop.
Okay.
Here we are. We're now in July. We have been under strict orders to protect ourselves, be safe since March. We all entered into a zone when it comes to this work as pastors, as leaders in our community. When we all, for the first time, started pastoring in the pandemic. Here we are now in July.
Here we are.
Stage here. We have the President of the United States saying what he's saying. Churches, some of them are opening up. We see spikes happening in other parts of the nation. What is your immediate response to the people of God of how we need to prepare ourselves for the days, the weeks ahead?
Well, my immediate response is do not panic. Do not make decisions based on emotions. I've seen a lot of that. And in my counseling, I would always advise don't make decisions, whether it's about marriage or businesses, business opportunities, choices in life, when you are in a state of emotion, of heightened emotionality. And I'm seeing that. And I've seen some persons make decisions that they've regretted because they were not, especially we as people of faith, because we supposed to acknowledge him in all of our ways so that he can direct our paths. And the him is the great capital H him, that is God himself. And I think that we need a settling of our spirits. And I think that is part of the prophetic role, is to offer hope in the midst of despairing times.
Yeah. I noticed that we have been getting a lot of, I'm gonna ask our brother to just cut his video, please, Brother Kevin. Thank you. Just cut your video, yes. We've been getting a lot of push from the administration, President's administration, to get back to normalcy. Question I have for you, Bishop, is there a normalcy ahead of us that was behind us?
You know, I think that question may be different. I noticed the pronoun us. We're talking about the community, the nation, the world. And that assumes that we're all on the same footing. There are those who advance that the coronavirus has made everybody equal at some point, but I think that's not true. I think there are health disparities. I think that people have handled the situation differently. And so I don't think that we are handling it the same way. I guess I would say that the storm called the coronavirus it has hit all of us, but I think we've handled it differently. And I wanted to make that delineation that individuals have handled it differently. There are those who've done more talking about it than acting out on their faith. And then there are those who've been trying to offer hope and instruction and advice to others. I think the problem, Pastor, is that there has been not only disparity in resources that come to us even before the pandemic, but there's disparity in advice coming to us and information coming to us from different, not just from government, but different levels of government, as well as how people are interpreting information. And I think the information disparity is what's causing some folks to handle it a little bit differently than others. And I think that's a big picture of it. We're locked in on the data, but we're not locked in on what God is saying. And I think that the two have to shake hands. The data and the Abba has to shake hands at some point. You know.
Can you give a follow-up? I'd like to give a follow-up question.
Okay.
Yeah, give me a bit of an example of the information that you find that is not getting to us as it should.
For example, even the notion of masks. The masks originally was to stop you from sharing with others whatever parts of the corona you may or may not have, or bacteria, so forth. And then it was, no, it protects them from you. Then the masks are not good for you. You need to have it on 15 minutes. You only need it on when you're less than 6 feet apart. Then you have the president not wearing masks at all and parading in front as though that is a hoax. Everything is a hoax. And so you're hearing so much misinformation. People are on the tips of their seat in terms of vaccines and panacea, if you will, and then you hear about this drug that's almost tested. Then you had the president talking about some drug, hydrochloroquine or whatever you said, that name, and then got people who trying that. So it's information that's flowing that's not same. Is disparate. Is information flowing differently from different levels without a sense of synchronicity, from the federal government, the state government, the news reporters, Fox News versus CNN, and it's just a charade of information. So we're not even able to receive the same information. I think that's causing some confusion among others. And there was a poem by Rudyard Kipling called "If," and the opening words is, "If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you." That is the opening statements of that "If," and I think that it's like,
yeah.
Hi.
And the rest goes, "And you shall be a man someday, my son."
Yes. Oh, yeah. So I forgot you were the great poet. I forgot. Shouldn't have never forgotten that. Yeah.
No, not at all.
Well, I went as far as I can go with the opening part of it. I am the master of my fate, and I am the captain of my soul.
All right. Bishop, thank you. What I've been noticing, I just want to throw out an observation that I have here, and then I want you to critique my observation.
Okay.
Seems like things are just becoming more and more politicized. We are politicized. We are seeing the politicization of a health crisis, a world global health crisis. Is that an observation that you have, or is there something else we're missing here?
Well, I think if the only voices that we are listening to are voices of the politicians, then I think we can expect it to be politicized. And I think that's a part of the problem, is that the only voices that we're hearing in dominant media are the voices of persons who make no claim to be spiritual or to be, God-fearing. That name God has not even been mentioned. It's taboo, it's off limits. And so when you have elections in front of us and praying, I've seen almost everybody backtracking based on what public opinion is. We cannot open, but when there's outcry from the community, we can open now. So I've seen the politicization is what I expect when the only voices that you're hearing are politicians, because I've been in politics, I've been around politics, I've been in government, and I understand the nature of politicians and politics. Now, in its purest form, if I may leave this, politics is not originally supposed to be a bad word or something that people should distrust or shrink up when they hear it. Politics comes from the word polis, two words, polis and teak, which are Greek words, which means polis means the public square, and teak means to talk, or which means to have voice in the public square. And that voice is supposed to be the voice of the people, for the people, and by the people. But what happens in terms of this whole political and politicization, as you call it, is that politicians, they don't speak the voice of the people. It should work that way. They're sent there to represent our sentiment, but it's happening the other way around. We are supposed to line up with their sentiment. And so there's a disconnect there in terms of how politics in its purest form, and politics is the ability for people in the polis or in the metropolis or metropolis or cosmopolitan or metropolitan areas to have a voice. And I think that we are not hearing the voices of the people, clergy. I mean, why should there be only one or two voices that this whole nation or state or whatever hears? And I think that the power will be in the mix when conversations are being held and had by individuals with wisdom, with those who consult. I mean, I grew up in an age, and with that even politicians consulted with clergy. They all had. They consulted with Billy Graham, or they consulted. I mean, look in the Bible, the kings consulted with the prophets, but there is no even mention of the name God. It's no mentioning of the name God. There's no mention of faith. Houses of worship have been relegated to being non-essential. We have to watch that language. And so anytime the only voice that you hear are those that are politicians, and you're hearing it 24/7, all day long, all night long, going into the human psyche, and yet there's no voice. Whatever happened to, is there a word from the Lord? I mean, is that something that obsolete now? Is there a word from the Lord? And the prophet should say, yes, that it should always be a word from the Lord. And I think that that's what we do, but we don't have the same microphone, if you will, with technology as they do and are being paid to have. And that's a part of the disparity in our information.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Bishop. And that's one of the reasons why we have you on here tonight. I think we are at a very important moment in this part of this journey as we move through this pandemic. Fall is coming. Schools are going to be open, not going to be open. Churches are moving closer to the possibility of opening. And on the subject of the church, here we are now. We are in the middle of something we've never been in before. I know that you can't predict, or maybe you can prophesy, but how do you see the church looking in a post-pandemic era? And that's a very wide, general question. Okay. Let me narrow it just a little bit more. How do you see the church in its ability to affect community, be the salt of the earth and the light of the world where it is in a post-pandemic era?
Well, my theology and my experience suggests that we usually find God the more in the valley. And the pandemic is sort of a valley situation. We celebrate God on the mountain, but we encounter God. We meet him in a special way in the valley. So I think that when we talk about the church, and I pay close attention to your pronouns there, because some people's church don't look like my church. My church don't look like some people's church. And sometimes look like some people's God doesn't look like my God. So I watch the pronouns there. So what does that mean for the church? I think that the pandemic has a way of drawing us closer to God. I think the pandemic has forced many of us to come out of being stale, business as usual, relying on traditions and habits and way we always did it, and not even have a desirous to do a new thing in Zion, or to sing unto the Lord a new song. And I think the pandemic forces the newness, the budding of the newness. And I think, if I might interject here, is that my thoughts are that we have a viral pandemic, but the Black church has always experienced pandemic proportion situations. So we are used to pandemics. Now, that term doesn't just fit for the virus, but we've been experiencing the pandemic and the virus of racism for a long time, and it has spread. It has spread as fast as the virus of the coronavirus has spread. We talk about how it is spread and how it is being transmitted, but racism has spread from generation to generation, and from city to city and shore to shore, and they haven't found a cure for it yet. And they're still testing. And so we are used to pandemics. Slavery was a pandemic. The segregation that I grew up in the state of Virginia, where they shut down the schools and covered in the swimming pools and didn't allow us to attend their schools and so forth, or sit at their lunch counters. I lived through that. That was pandemic. That was impactful to the psyche of the Negro. And so it made us stronger. It made us trust in God the more. His name was being mentioned from the rooftops, from the civil rights leaders, and from the preachers, and from even the teachers in our classrooms. Before they taught us reading, writing, and arithmetic, we had devotions, and they prayed for us, and they gave us tools to handle the pandemic that we were being raised up in. And I'm looking at some of the protests, even, which I think are an important piece of the puzzle for Black Lives Matter, and in the crime, the killings that are going on, the knee on the neck, which is buttressing the pandemic. But I think what Martin King and others that modeled in front of us and came to my town as a youngster, they made sure that they had prayer visuals and that they fortified their own spirits, and they didn't go out on their own, but they went out in the name of the Lord, and with the edict of God is fighting our battles, and God is on our side, and love will ultimately win. I think that even in our protests, we got to make sure, we got to be careful that we don't leave God out of the picture if we want guaranteed success in our protests.
Thank you, Bishop. Oh my goodness. And you brought up something here that's going to help me segue very easily. I just want to remind everyone you're listening to Think About It here from the Sanctuary of First Baptist Church of Glen Cove. We're streaming live on Facebook via Zoom. Next week, we want you to be with us on the 16th. Dr. Vernon Shelton and I will be co-hosts together as we come together, and we have some rich time with two fabulous women who are working and serving, Assemblyman Kimberly Jean-Pierre and also Congresswoman Jackie Gordon. They'll be our special guests on next week. That'll be the 16th, Thursday night, 8:30 on Think About It. Again, my co-host will be Dr. Vernon Shelton of the Holy Trinity Baptist Church. He's also been a part of our network too, Dr. Elliott, and I'm looking forward to that. You said something here that is going to allow me now to segue to a very rich subject, the Black church. The Black church. Does the Black church have a Black theology?
I think that the Black church does have at its core and at its soul a Black theology. But I think even as in the days of old, we from time to time must be called back to the core, being called back to the God of who brought us across, the Red Sea and the Jordan and the Red Sea of slavery. And I think that is the cycle that we see in the Bible, is that we acknowledge and we worship God but then we fade back into. But I think there has to be a call. I think there has to be a reclamation. We have to reclaim, and I think there has to be a call back to, and I don't hear that call back to the theology that has brought us, which is really liberation theology. And allow me to slide this in right now, that liberation theology is a great theology. It is, Moses liberating, leading them out, and so forth. And Jesus said, I came to set the captives free. But I think that we've confused two terms. Liberal theology and liberation theology are not synonymous.
All right. Help us with that, Bishop.
Well, I think that, liberation theology is setting captives free, first of all, spiritually, and from their the oppression and the oppressive behaviors of the oppressor. And but I think that we are being through liberal theology, we're being set free from those things that has set us free.
Yeah. Wow. And I get the difference. Liberation is God setting us free. Liberal is about getting away from the things that have set us free.
When it's taken to the wrong zenith. I think it had, when there's no limits, when there's no controls, there's no, when it's unbridled, when it's almost like, what is your agenda? Attach it to, and get in on the bandwagon. And I think that we have to watch, we have to be careful for that. We have to be careful about that, because, that those bridges that brought us across, I don't think we necessarily need to tear them down. I think we need to remember them. I mean, we're tearing down statues, but I think those things that are positive that brought us across, I think we need to make sure that they're shored up, fixed up, remembered, because the scripture says that one day your children will ask you, what do these stones mean? And pick up those stones and place them in the midst of the Jordan. And when they ask you, tell them that these stones reminds us of our blessings and our burdens, and reminds us that it was God who brought us through. So we got to make sure we don't tear down some of the bridges that have gotten us where we are by joining everybody's agenda. We have some common agendas, but everybody's agenda, I wouldn't say is necessarily something that we all want to buy into, the whole cookie, the cookie cutter, and we have to be careful with that. You have to be careful with that.
And we can't be ahistorical, and I think that's part of the problem, that we forget that God reveals himself in our history.
Right.
And we have to be very mindful of that. We're talking about the Black church and a Black theology. And obviously, while in this pandemic, we have seen the pandemonium that came our way in the death of George Floyd on May 25th of this year. Right here in the city of Glen Cove, if I may share this with you, Bishop, we have just recently had a virtual town hall with our police department, sharing with us the protocols and measures and modes that they use, especially when trying to build a better relationship with Black and Brown communities. And I think we had a successful outing with that town hall. What are some other measures do you think are important for the Black church to pursue in relationship to dealing with the pandemic of racism in America?
Well, I think that what's missing, and I'm glad to hear that you've had town hall meeting. I think that there is a lack of community education. Okay. Because there's a lack of community relations. Even some of the police don't have any knowledge of the communities in which they're serving. Admittedly, many of them are not from that community, don't live there, don't understand it. Some of them, like me, are dealing with Black people or minorities for the first time directly, because they've grown up so community education based on community relations, and then not only then community organization. If we can organize around core issues that we all agree is worthwhile that we all share in this. This is a threat not only to Black people, this is a threat to all people, Hispanics, Blacks, whites, Jews, whoever is being oppressed because, or who needs help, who needs resources. And I think that community education, community organization is the perfect platform for community development. Community education, community organization, based on community relationships that are genuine, are the perfect platform for community action that represents the community. Again, of the people, by the people, for the people. And there's nobody hosting in my communities credible community education platforms, let alone community organization and pulling together. I see some attempts, but it's not happening as it ought, and how I've experienced in having pastored in both urban and suburban communities, North and South. 10 years in Virginia, in the heat of Prince Edward County, where the education laws were impacted to integrate, as well as Brooklyn urban, as well as Long Island. And so I know what community organization looks like. I know the impact of it, but it's not just a bunch of people coming together hollering at each other at a city council meeting or at a board of trustee meeting or a school board meeting. And it's because relationships are not where they used to. And you would think that maybe technology would enhance relationships, but sometimes maybe technology, as powerful as it is and as necessary as it is, it keeps me from talking to you and being in a room with you and feeling your pain and sharing with you and breaking bread with you. And coupled with that, the pandemic said you can't hug, you can't shake hands, you can't touch, you got to stay distant. And so all of that's happening, and I think that the common touch is being lost somewhere in the whole saga.
Bishop, we're getting ready to come to an end here. A couple of more questions that I want to put to you. Preaching. Mm-hmm. Where is our preaching going as Black preachers in the Black preaching tradition in our Black? Where's preaching going?
Well, I'll share my vantage point. I think that if you look at prophets to suggest the response, and if you look at the prophets of old and how they may impact us and our prophetic role today, I think that most prophets are known for a particular message. They're not really necessarily known for a whole lot of different messages. Like Amos is known for justice, and Ezekiel is known for reviving a people that are scattered and so forth, being brought back, as we talked about earlier, to the core and to family and to home and to community. And I think that so when we talk about Black preaching, again, as you may have noticed in my responses to you tonight, I have kind of veered away from putting everybody in the same cup, that all Black preachers got the same message and preach the same way and so forth and so on. And I think that there are those among us who God has anointed to have a sharp prophetic edge that cuts, that challenges, that's sometimes uncomfortable and not palatable, uncomfortable, and to sear the deranged conscience of man and call us back or bring us to a place of repentance, and yet offer justice, offer mercy and grace. So I think that Black preaching, with less and less Black preachers going to seminary, I think that less and less, and if so, less and less to Black seminaries, and I think that the messages that they are receiving in some of the other seminaries are not the same as they would have gotten. Having attended both, Black and white schools and so forth, and seminaries and so forth, I know the impact of culturally sensitive training centers. So I'm not sure where Black preaching is going right now, because I think that we're moving away from just preaching to draw crowds and so you can sustain ministry. And right now, with the pandemic, it means that if you're not relevant, if you're not really touching people at the points of need with technology, if you ain't saying what I need you to say, and not what I want you to say, but what I need you to be saying, I have other options that I did not even consider prior to the pandemic. So I think it's forcing us to up our game in terms of being on point and being prophetic and speaking to the pain, even with a positive perspective on the pain of the predicament of our people.
Well, Bishop, you've got around you and many men and women who admire you, a lot of young preachers. I'd like to think I'm one of the young preachers that, but not one of the youngest, but one of the. What is your view of young preachers today, and what advice would you share to the young preacher?
My advice to the young preachers is to learn the art of shadowing. I think that of shadowing, like Elijah, the value of shadowing or being shadowed. Elijah shadowed Elisha, and Moses shadowed Joshua, and so forth. And Jesus shadowed his, and I think that's a missing people. He said, "Follow me, and I'll make you." And I think that the understanding of follow is shallow and is not as impactful as it ought to be. I mean, follow me doesn't mean show up on Sunday morning and sit in the pulpit with me. I mean, can you follow me to Bible study? Can you follow me, as I follow me to deacon meetings and trustee meetings, and follow me into community meetings? Follow me. And I think that somehow many young people, not all the young preachers, not all, so I don't put up everybody saying, have a limited perspective as what it means to follow. And that follow is Sunday morning, basically, and being there ready to read a scripture, or when is my time to preach, or so forth. But I think that we need to have a strong conversation about what it means. It was said of Joshua, he became Moses' successor because he followed Moses fully. He followed fully. And that whole notion of what fully means, breaking bread with and traveling with. I mean, you know something about that with your pastor, Bill Burry, and I knew him. And listen, we carried bags. We rode with them where they went out, whether we were preaching or needed it or not. We were shadowing, and we were watching, and we were learning, and we were following so close that if the baton was to be passed, we would be in a position to receive it. If not there, but in an adjacent location. And so I think that there is not the same gravity to what follow means, and to be fathered, what it means. And that's a missing piece of what I have experienced and observed.
Bishop, last question that I will have for you tonight. And you've been a great leader in our preaching community, in our church community, beyond the Black church, beyond just in the faith community, period. You've been a great leader. What for you as a bishop, as a pastor, is if you could name one great goal you want to accomplish going forward with your work at Antioch Church, what would that goal be?
The goal would be that, and this goal is for Antioch, but it's in our institutions that we hold dear, whether they're our associations, our conventions, whether it's our colleges, and particularly our churches, is that we learn the ability to have an institutional idea. In other words, a vision that outlives a personality. Usually in our associations and conventions and colleges and universities and churches, that when there's a transition of leadership, the whole work that had begun goes out of the window. For example, the Eastern Baptist Association started some years ago, the EBA School of Religion, out of which individuals like Bishop Harvey and Bishop Pastor Millett and Renee Washington Gardner and a host of individuals that are pastoring prominent pulpits today came through. It was ours. It represented our theology, our doctrines, and so forth. And but right after that administration, under Washington Lundy, that vision of us having our own institution of higher learning kind of went out the window. And you don't even hear mention of it anymore. So the value of an institutional idea, a vision that Elliott may have taken from Burrell, who was my predecessor, and tried to keep alive and take it to another level of freshness, and hand that institutional idea that this is what we believe, this is what is at our core, and these are some things that we think ought to go beyond first generation, one generation, but need to be passed on to those that are followed fully and those who have been fathered and mothered by the ministry.
That sounds just like my pastor, Jesse B. Bilberry, down in Louisiana, that the next person.
Otherwise, we start all over again.
Yeah.
And we're not able to build upon.
Yeah, we're not. And the cohesiveness gets lost. There's no cohesion from one generation to the next. Exactly. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Bishop. This has been a wonderful time that we've shared together. I want to commend you again for the great work, the great leadership that you have provided, are providing. And we pray God's richest blessings upon you as you lead your church through these difficult times, this valley moment that we have in America. Again, my regards to Lady Elliott and to your family and to the Antioch family. Tonight, we thank God for Bishop Phillip E. Elliott. Again, Dr. Elliott, thank you for being with us. You've been listening to Think About It. I'm your host tonight, Roger Williams. We'll be back with you next week, sharing with you on the 16th. My co-host next week will be Dr. Vernon Shelton, and we'll be looking forward to sharing with you again. God bless you all. God keep you, and may God richly bless you. Have a good night.
Thank you.